Hey there, it's Michelle Caruana from Play Cafe Academy and Profitable Play. And I am back today with another recorded coaching call with a prospective Play Cafe owner from my Playmaker Society program. So today we are speaking with Jessica, who is just a couple months shy of opening an indoor playground slash play cafe in the greater Chicago area. And this is a really fun conversation to share with you guys because we covered some topics that I don't think I've ever covered in a recorded coaching call before. I've, of course, covered them in my private one-on-one client sessions, but I don't think it's anything I've ever talked about on this channel. And you guys seem to really love the recorded coaching calls. So if that is still true, let me know in the comments. I would love to do more of these. I love speaking one-on-one with Playmaker Society members, and I love sharing those conversations with you as well so that you can also make forward progress with your business. So in this conversation, some things that Jessica and I talk about are the layout of her space, doing private party rentals versus semi-private parties, considering her age range, space, and area. We talk about opening in a strip mall and combining two spaces together, which is something that is unique about her situation. We talk about fundraising, doing drop shipping apparel sales, so things like t-shirts, sweatshirts, that type of merch versus like Kickstarter fundraising and things like that. We also talk in this conversation about how she can be more accommodating of male caregivers because her husband is actually going to be quitting his full-time job and he is going to be the in-person face of the business, even though Jessica is going to be handling a lot of the social media and marketing efforts. But she really wanted to be cognizant when designing her space of how she can be more welcoming of all genders and not just exclusive to mothers and female caregivers. So again, I'm really excited to share that specific conversation with you. And then finally, we talk about designing her website, how that ranks in importance versus social media efforts. And we also talk about what costs she might want to consider moving forward with her website. So does she need to pay for ongoing maintenance and support, and whether or not that actually makes sense for her business? And my answer might surprise you. All right, I am so excited to share this conversation, and I am so excited to share Jessica's story, and I can't wait to see all of the success that she has with Little Harts Play Cafe in the Chicago area. All right, without further ado, here is my conversation with Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am very excited to talk to you. So, this is a recorded coaching call. So, to give everybody a little context, do you want to go ahead and tell me a little bit about where you are in your journey, what your business is, what you're hoping it will look like, and where you're located, all that good stuff?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Jessica, and I am located in Northwest Indiana. So I'm about 45 minutes from downtown Chicago. My business it really was inspired by, so I was in the military. I separated last year. And I'm from this area originally. Um, and when I left or when I came back, my life looked a lot different. I had a 2-year old. Well, now he's almost two, a husband, bought a home when we got back here. And I realized that making friends at this point in my life it was very different. I still have my friends from, before. However, we're not all in the same stage of life. So I had gone to a play cafe for the first time and I was just so inspired. And I really want to create a place where moms, dads, caregivers, all the same, can come and feel comfortable in drinking their quality hot cup of coffee, being able to socialize and letting their kids do the same, roam around, play, learn. Because I think the biggest adjustment in my life now that I have a child has been understanding that I run on his time. So if we go out to eat and the food doesn't come out fast enough, we've got 45 minutes from the time we sit down, whether or not the food gets there or not. He's ready to go and we all have to be ready to go. So I really do want to create a space where people can be comfortable and have a good time, meet other people who are maybe in the same stage of life as them or who have things in common. So I'm really hoping that that is what we get to do here.
All right, so can you tell me a little bit about where you are in your process, where you are today?
So we are kind of going out of order regarding or in comparison to the suggestions that you have. I know like picking a location shouldn't be the first thing. However, My dad actually owns a storefront property that's about 4 minutes from our house, and it's like perfect location. He doesn't have tenants right now, and the opportunity kind of just came up. Everything fell into place. So we have a location. We are starting the build out by the end of this month. I'm waiting for the architect who I'm going to see on Saturday. We actually have a lot of furniture thanks to the owners of Sweet Peas Cafe in Kokomo. She's so sweet. She helped us out a lot and we were able to buy a lot of things from her. What else? We really just need to get in there and get the build out going.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about this space. So I know from our communication before this call that it's 2 units, totaling, I believe it's about 3,000 square feet, a little bit
Mhm.
over. Is that correct?
It's a little bit less than, oh no, yeah, a little bit more. Yeah, you're right. You're right. A little bit over 3,000 square feet. One side is, so it's a commercial storefront. It's got a total, the strip mall that we will be in has a total of 4 units. The center two are ours. And one of them is more of a like rectangular shape, and that's the larger one that's 1,700 square feet. And one of them is more of a square shape. And that one's 1,500. However, in the past, we have been able to create an opening to connect both spaces. It's currently closed, but we want to be able to mesh them and really be strategic about how we choose to mesh those spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you mean like a full opening of the space, so completely knocking down the wall, or just maybe putting windows? What were you kind of thinking in terms of combining?
So I'm not sure. And that's what I was going to ask you is if you had any advice. So we actually found out that they are building a train station less than a mile from where we will be located. So we really are hoping to take advantage of that and possibly create somewhat of a separation where we can take advantage of being a coffee shop where people can just kind of pull up, pick up their coffee, and head to the train, because that's a huge development for our area. But also, we do still want our main focus to be the play part of the cafe. However, I have just in like seeing different reviews on different cafes and just how people feel, I almost feel like people want people can be kind of hesitant if you have like strangers just coming in or strangers just coming in who don't have kids. So I wonder if that is significant for me to keep those two separate. What do you think?
Have you ever been to Little Beans in the Chicago area? I
No, but I do follow them.
Okay. So I have been there, and they're a great example of a facility that I think does both really well. So
Okay.
I'm not thinking of the Evanston location. There's another one that it's not coming to the top of my head. It's been many years since I was there, but
Okay.
it's about 20 minutes outside of Chicago, and it is a full cafe. And
Okay.
what I love is they do have a wall separating the cafe area and the play area. So I think parents there, and I know I felt a lot more comfortable seeing people come and go and order cafe items because those adults without kids never breach the play
Sure.
area. And what I love about that facility specifically is that the cafe is completely divided, but it's a glass wall.
Okay.
So I was there with an infant, so obviously I had to accompany my infant the entire
Okay.
time. But there was plenty of parents who were sitting in the cafe who had older kids that were a little bit more independent.
Hmm.
They would kind of come and go, and of course, the owners always want the parents within, earshot or within a close
Sure.
distance of the kids, but they still felt very comfortable going up, ordering, getting their food, picking up their food, and bringing it back to their table while their kids played because there's never a point where you're in that facility where you can't see at least.
Oh,
So
that's a
there
good
might
idea.
be, yeah, so there might be a few minutes where you're out of earshot, but it's still very close and the play area is still contained. And again, I don't think they've ever, I've been following them for quite a while. I've visited them a couple times. I personally never experienced any adults without kids venturing even towards that area. So I think it provides, like I said, that level of comfort. And what I love about that facility as well is in addition to the cafe seating right by the counter on the one side of the wall, on the play area side of the wall, they also have a section of tables and chairs. So parents with younger kids can have the option of being a little bit closer.
Okay.
which I really liked.
Yeah, that's great.
I think they're because unfortunately, knocking the entire wall down is probably going to be very expensive. It's going to limit the future uses of that space. So you might want to consider that. I mean, it's a little bit of a unique situation because
Yeah.
that your dad owns it. So
Well, and then even that, my dad is actually a construction foreman. So he is doing us a big favor and helping us do the work pretty much at cost of the material. And he needs to bring some of the people that work with him in, so we'll need to pay them. But I'm hoping that that does help us kind of stay a little bit more in budget.
that's awesome. And you're in a great situation. So
And my father-in-law's an electrician, so I'm like, hopefully that's
you got
helpful.
the
Yeah.
architects, designers in the family.
Yeah.
But yeah, on one of the main things I always tell people is to visit as many spaces in person as possible.
Okay.
That one specifically because it's very similar to, I think, what you might end up with in terms of layout. But you're very lucky in that, the Chicago area has so many amazing
Mhm.
examples of indoor playgrounds. And your population is so high in a lot of those areas that even spaces like 15, 20 minutes from each other aren't necessarily considered direct competitors. So there might be a lot more collaboration opportunities and ways to work with them as opposed to seeing them as direct competition, which
Sure.
I always love. Because, I know you mentioned that you went to, I think, at least one play cafe, but for me, when I went into this industry, I had all of these preconceived notions. I had this dream based on my Pinterest board, and I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. And then once I actually went to multiple facilities, we kind of did like a little road trip, and Chicago is one of the areas that we
Nice.
went to. And once I saw people actually using this space and how it looked in person, because, I feel like I say this all the time, but a lot of times these photographs are taken by professional photographers and they don't always look the same in person.
Sure.
So once you actually see what it looks like with your own eyes, once you see how parents use a facility, once you kind of hear and pick up on what they're talking about, what they're loving, what they're maybe complaining a little bit about, it completely changed my entire perspective about what I thought I wanted. And I literally flipped all of my ideas on their head, and my only regret is honestly not going to even more facilities,
Okay.
because it gave me just so much insight and so much firsthand knowledge because I only had one child at the time, and it sounds like you have one child.
Mhm.
So I had limited experience when it comes to things like birthday parties, um,
Sure.
classes. So I had to go in person and kind of, without being creepy, talk to people,
Sure.
look at their websites to see what they had going on, check out their classrooms in person, check out their party rooms, because I know that's something that that's probably going to come up in this call is,
Mhm.
creating party rooms, seeing how big they were, seeing what kind of seating they had, all that good stuff. Because as a first time parent, again, we have very limited firsthand knowledge. So going to see it in person, at least with our own eyes, even if we can't attend a party there, was probably the most helpful thing I did pre
Okay.
pre-opening.
Definitely. I will add that to my list of things to do. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And I see that you also were considering potentially doing private rentals and then also the option for semi-private parties. So
Mhm.
do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I did start a focus group, and that was super easy to do because you just go on Facebook and look at the moms pages for the towns, that the town that you're in, the town surrounding you. And it seems like for the most part, people are more interested in full venue rentals and the private parties. However, I don't want to limit myself um, in not giving us the option for like semi-private and including a party room, just because I do feel like that is limiting our potential income, because it would be a lower price point that would open the doors up to more, another type of customer essentially, with a different budget. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with you, and I think you are right on track with that. And it really depends on the size of your space because
Okay.
some people, if they're working with 1,800 square feet, they might not have the option or the space to put in a party room. And if they have, 10,000 square feet, it might be too big to sustainably do private rentals without charging $10,000 a party. So I think 3,000-ish square feet is the perfect size to offer both options.
Okay.
And I definitely would recommend it. I always recommend adding a party slash multi-use room for
Sure.
all different
Okay.
reasons, like classes during open play, summer camp possibilities, event possibilities, renting it out to music class instructors and things like that. There are so many potentials for a separate room other than birthday parties. There really is no downside if you have the space and if it's not taking away from your play area, which in this case, I think you have more than enough space to have everything that you want included, especially because you already have a little bit of separation. So
And
I
that's what I was
definitely,
thinking. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I definitely think having both options is going to be the way to go. But one question that I wanted to ask just to clarify is what age do you plan on serving primarily?
I think we're gonna start with 0 to 6,
Okay.
just while we get our feet wet, and then I was thinking that because just what I've learned in the focus groups is some people do inquire about older kids. Maybe even if our play equipment doesn't cater to them, the option of offering classes or different things that outside of our play area that could service the older children.
And that's another great example of a way you can utilize that multi-use room during open play. So when you don't have a birthday party, maybe on just like a Tuesday afternoon, especially if you're open a little bit later. So if you're open after the kids get home from school, you can make it I know Christine from Sweet Peas Play Cafe, she had like a little homeschooling area where people could go and just do their homework. They had a lot of STEM toys. They had a lot of activities for the older kids that could kind of move around their facility.
Okay.
So things like Legos, things like board games, things that would keep the older kids occupied without having to invest in like a giant climbing structure or something like that because, this space just wasn't there. So that's another great example of a multi-use room is almost creating like a sibling space.
Yes, I
Because
like that.
that's the one downside is, with your size space and with your main play equipment catering to kids 6 and under, while I think it's a great opportunity to accommodate siblings, I don't think that you'll necessarily be able to accommodate just, a 9 or a 10-year-old on their own, right? They're probably only going to be interested if they have a younger sibling playing or if they're attending a birthday party with a sibling. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, again, having that extra space. And I have a 9-year-old and I really appreciate that, especially because we're growing our family. So I would absolutely appreciate being able to bring all my kids and just, being like, hey,
Sure.
here's a board game room or here's a room where you can play your tablet or read your book or do whatever, and just stay safe and contained. And I can feel comfortable and still kind of chase around the younger siblings. So I, as a parent, really appreciate that. And again, it's those items are easy to just pack up and put away. And something else that's really cool right now that I see a lot of cafes doing is those like virtual reality type games that also
Yes.
don't take up a lot of space and are very appealing to the older kids, but also to the parents. And, even to the younger kids as young as like 4, 5, 6.
Mhm.
And I'm not just talking about the headsets necessarily, but there's like the beam games that you kind of put on the ceiling
Yes.
and they have a little screen and you can choose what game you want to play. And some of them are partner games, some of them are solo games. So, installing one of those in a party room or a multi-use room might be another great example
Okay.
of a very space conscious way of potentially entertaining siblings or even doing a party games or hosting a class that again doesn't take up a lot of space that can be kind of tucked away when not in use.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And one other thing that I wanted to add before we kind of move on is, with that age group, that 0 to 6, I also think you're kind of right on the money with offering both private rentals and the semi private parties because, I found that I can pretty much draw a line down the center when it comes to like first, second, third birthday parties. Some of them are like 100 people, right? They want, grandparents to come, they want Aunt and Uncles to come. They have these big, huge families. And I know in some cultures specifically, like first and second birthday parties are major milestones. And it's very customary to have these big family parties. And because there are so many adults, because there is such a high volume of guests, they value the full rental and they're willing to pay for it because it is such a significant milestone in their culture. Or maybe it's not a significant milestone in their culture, but maybe they just wanted to bring all the family together and treat it kind of like a reunion of sorts. And then on the other side of that line are people who simply want to celebrate their child, but they can't justify the price of a full venue rental because there's only going to be like 5 or 6 attendees, but they still want to give their child a really nice party and maybe their house can't accommodate it or apartment. So I think it's a great middle ground having both options because especially with that age when it's kind of before the kids are going to school and they don't have, a whole class of kids to invite, it's, it's very almost polar opposite what people value, what people want, what people are willing to pay for at that age. So I think that having multiple options is really going to make you stand out. And because of our size, we focused on the private rentals, and that did limit us. So for our second location, we absolutely put in that second room, and it opened up a whole new world of birthday party opportunities like those smaller parties who would have never been able to justify paying for an entire venue rental at our first location. So that first location, we could really only do those big parties with a lot of adults that had, all sorts of decorations and big setups, which was great. We loved it. But I would have also loved to have the option to host those smaller parties in a way that was cost effective for the parents.
Got it. Thank you so much for that insight. That's super helpful.
Yeah. All right. What is next? Or do you have any other questions about?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at your questions here.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so the second thing that you asked in our little pre-consult communication was about no inventory t-shirt sales as a form of raising some money in advertising before you open. So do you want to give me a little bit of background on that about what your goal is? And I know
Sure.
you have some background in that as well.
Yeah, so Facebook has been really good to me in the past. I've got a pretty good Facebook following, and what I mean by that is just I have a large family. I've, had several different jobs, lived in many areas, so I kind of have accumulated a lot of friends on Facebook. And anytime that I've done something, I have a really good outcome. I've done fundraisers for local things around here, non for profits. I've collected like suitcases to take to different non-for-profits, whether it be like homeless shelters is usually the big one. And people are so open to helping. And I've even asked for money for things, to buy groceries and to take them, to an area where I know that people who don't have housing are. And people just like willingly just give me money. I'm so thankful that they trust me to do that. So I was toying with the idea of segueing and one announcing to people that we are opening up this business, um two using that as an advertising opportunity, in selling t-shirts and sweaters, just because that's a thing. I mean, I don't know if that's everywhere, but people love t-shirts and sweaters with logos and things, that you can just throw on and head out. Um so I didn't know if that was worth the effort of, which it doesn't seem to be super difficult. I already kind of tried it. But just wondering what you would think about that as a way of raising some money, but also raising some awareness and just kind of like a general announcement like, hey, friends, this is what we're looking at doing. This is how you can support us before we open.
Yeah, and I think, there are pros and cons to this, like with so many things that we, do with our businesses. So we'll kind of talk through it, and talk through my thoughts because I do have, some opinions both ways. But again, I think this is one other area where your situation is a little bit unique because for, just the average person kind of entering into this, I would say honestly, absolutely not.
Okay.
Just because t-shirts and sweaters have a pretty high direct cost to them, even if you're using a print on demand like Printify or Printful or something like that, there still is a pretty high direct cost when it comes to actually supplying that item. So what I typically recommend, and I know you're obviously in my course, so you have an entire lesson on fundraising and Kickstarter and those types of platforms specifically. But basically, to kind of sum up the point that I want to make and what I talk about in that training is I really try to get people to focus on things that are very valuable to other people, but are very, very low cost to you.
Okay.
So a t-shirt or a sweater would be something that is high value to somebody, but it's also high cost to you to
Mhm.
be able to provide. So while
Yes.
I do think that you can absolutely generate awareness and generate some money, I think there are better ways to go about it. Now, again, with some caveats, I think that if you create some really cool designs, maybe hire a graphic designer, or maybe you have a friend that's a graphic designer. Where I see people struggle in this area is just selling merch with like a logo, or something like that. I see items take off much more successfully when they have like a cool phrase, or when they have, something catchy, or, a parenting related phrase or something like that. So, like for example, um, you know, some of the t-shirts that I've seen be most successful are statements that align with your business's vision. So for example, if your space is about relaxation or meeting new people, I would focus on that. If your space is focused on inclusion and accessibility, I would focus on that. So again, I would focus on something that people will want to wear, even if they're in a different area, or even if, they don't have kids, because the logos is that's where I see people kind of struggle, because in order to make any significant revenue from t-shirt and sweatshirt sales, you're going to have to charge like 50, $60 per
Mhm.
sweatshirt, $30, $40 per t-shirt. So again, I have found that people are just much more willing to buy things with like the catchy phrases or cutesy design, something like that. So that might be something to consider. But in general, I generally recommend people focus on like packs of play passes, something that is very valuable to another person, because they do have a real cost assigned to them, right? If they were to go to your website at some point in June, July and purchase a play pass, that would cost them real money. But it technically doesn't have a direct cost to you in order to provide that. Sure, it means that you're going to be able to welcome X less number of people whichever day they visit, but that opportunity cost is obviously not a direct cost. So that's where I kind of tell people to focus on. And if they are like you and they have a lot of people who are in their network, but are maybe not parents or maybe outside of the area, there are other ways that you can ask for support. So, for example, you can offer to put their names on a wall, or create like a founding wall or something like that with all of
Oh,
your
okay.
contributors. Something that is very sentimental, because things that are sentimental have real value to people, and they like seeing their contributions kind of come to life. And I always like when people are fundraising and they are fundraising for something very specific. So I know you have your play structure, but I'm just going to use it as an example. If you say, here is the play structure I'd like to buy, I need X amount of dollars to have this exact play structure, to kind of give them updates and maybe, have them be able to know exactly where that money is going towards. That's also very helpful, instead of just saying, oh, we're raising money towards our startup business. Having a more focused intention with the money is very, very helpful, because again, people don't just see their money going into the void of a small business, right? They know that it's going to be going directly to this specific play structure, or this latte machine, or this um, whatever specific tangible thing you're going to be using with the money. That's very helpful. But again, I would really try to focus on things that are very valuable to others, but are very low cost to you. But the good news, and this is where I kind of get into the pros, the good news is that there's really no downside of having t-shirts and sweatshirts and other merch available if you're using something like print on demand. There's, of course, a very, low cost entry fee. So I know with like Printify, for example, because that's what I use, there's like a $15 per month fee in order to use the platform. There's a cost to order samples. There's a cost maybe associated with hiring a graphic designer, but there's really no downside. So while I wouldn't necessarily rely on it for the bulk of your fundraising efforts, I don't see any real downside other than, maybe not making as much as you would have hoped.
Sure.
But I would try to brainstorm other things that are, again, very valuable to people, low cost to you, like play passes, like maybe weekday birthday parties or something like that for
Okay.
people in your area. There's all sorts of things depending on your revenue stream, even coffee, drinks, bring a friend passes, because you're also going to have a cafe that gives you a plethora of items to potentially offer for Kickstarter levels or fundraising levels, things like that. Because even though there is a direct cost to coffee, lattes, things like that, they're very high profit margin items, much higher profit margin than any merchandise or apparel would be. So that's something to consider. And then another thing to consider, because, I completely understand where you're coming from, that people have been very willing to give to your, nonprofit efforts when it comes to helping people in need. In my experience, people just typically feel a different way when it comes to providing money for a for-profit business.
Sure.
So I'm not saying that they won't contribute, because it sounds like you have an amazing support system. I would just kind of maybe level your expectations with the fact that you are starting a for-profit business and it might just be a little bit different. So an alternative to maybe just asking for money straight up from people who don't have kids or who are not in the area is you could also consider Kickstart, or excuse me, um, crowdfunded loans. So for example, I know Kiva, Kiva, is one, but there's Mainvest, there's a lot of women-owned platforms. So essentially you're asking for micro loans from your community. So instead of asking for like $10,000 from one specific lender, you can say, hey, I'm looking for 100 $100 loans or something like that, or 1,000 $100 loans. And what happens is they all pledge a smaller amount. So again, that's why they're considered microloans. And then what happens is your platform manages the dispersion of the payments. So you would just make one monthly payment towards your total loan, and then they kind of distribute it to all of the people who contributed with a very low interest rate. And what I love about crowdfunding loans is that it gives people an opportunity to contribute even if they don't have kids, even if they have no real, intention of being able to support your business just because they're not local or because they're not in your demographic. It gives them a way to contribute that is a little bit safer and might be a little bit more appealing when it comes to contributing to a for-profit business. But it also
Sure.
allows you to get access to money at a very, very low interest rate, especially at a time where interest rates are in general very high. So again, what I love about fundraising is that you can do all of these different little campaigns in conjunction with each other. You don't have to only do apparel sales. You don't have to only do Kickstarter. You don't have to only do a crowdfunded loan. You can kind of utilize all of those at the same time. And if one doesn't work, that's okay. I wouldn't rely on one specific source for any significant amount of funding anyways. Um, but yeah, those are some of the things that I would try, just given your specific situation.
Super helpful. Thank you. I hadn't even opened my mind enough to consider doing multiple things at once. So I
I know it
appreciate
is,
that.
I mean, it's tricky to consider, but luckily it sounds like you have a great support system. So I wouldn't underestimate the value there. And what I love about, these types of things as well is you don't necessarily have to do them at the beginning of your business. So we did a Kickstarter campaign like 2 years into our business for a complete revamp. So we did a Kickstarter to make our space more accessible and more inclusive of the autistic community specifically.
Mm.
And we just purchased a bunch of new equipment. We basically made a sensory area. So again, even if you feel a little bit overwhelmed with options at the beginning, just know that it doesn't end. Your opportunity to, utilize any one of those strategies doesn't end on opening day. If you ever want to do a refresh or if you ever want to change your layout, because I know you're kind of back and forth, you can always utilize one of these marketing slash fundraising efforts years down the line. And our community was super receptive. And I honestly think they were even more receptive than they would have been at the beginning, just because I didn't have a big support system in the area. We had just moved there. I didn't have a lot of family and friends in the area. I didn't know anything about crowdfunding loans at the time. Nobody told me that that was an option. And so I just didn't have a lot of people that were super willing to contribute. And I don't know if this is true in your area, but in our area, it seems like a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe pops up like every week for a play cafe. And then
Oh,
they never end up coming to fruition. So we get a ton of them, and I'll see them shared in moms groups, and their goal is like $40,000, and then they maybe get like $1,000, and then they just kind of give up and go away. So I didn't want to be just another, indoor playground or just another play cafe adding to that noise. So I'm glad that I waited until I was a couple years into the process, until I was already open, until I had an established customer base who were excited about what we wanted to revamp our space with, how we wanted to make improvements. And again, that was very much aligned with our business's mission. So I think, again, having that direct correlation between what we wanted our business to be about and who we wanted to attract with exactly what we were wanting to purchase, we actually created an inventory list of the exact pieces that we wanted to purchase, which again made it a little bit more tangible for people and made them a little bit more willing to contribute. So again, if you feel overwhelmed with the options, just know that you can think about some of these years down the road if for whatever reason you can't do all of them prior to opening.
I think that's great. I think that really does circle back to like buy-in, having that buy-in of the people that you are serving, and now they know you as a brand, as a person, the quality. So I do like that, and I'm definitely going to keep that in mind, that it doesn't have to be done now, but in the future, I can always circle back to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. What was your next
So
question?
my next question, so I am going to be working full time and I'm in school. My husband, though, is working full time now. However, the plan is once we get situated, ideally, he's going to leave his full time job so that we can focus on our business. Um, he is obviously, I think he's wonderful. He's my husband, and he's a great father. However, I do wonder because I feel like the play cafes that I've been to three now, are mostly female adults, right? Like that's who you generally accompanies the children. And the people working behind the counter are generally females as well. So I wonder how receptive people are going to be to seeing my husband as the face of the business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I completely understand your fears, but I really don't think it's anything you need to worry about,
Okay.
especially because you can still kind of both be involved when it
Mhm.
comes to social media, when it comes to advertising on your website and things like that. But even if it was just your husband running the space, there are plenty of men in Playmaker Society, for example,
Mhm.
who run their businesses, and some of them don't even have kids.
Oh,
And
okay.
I've been really surprised at how receptive the community has been to them. And I think people's minds are more open now than ever. And especially given the area that you're in, I wouldn't worry about it. But again, I think people do like to see a family owned business. Especially after the pandemic, people are much more cognizant of where they're spending their money and they want to put it in family owned businesses. And I think that because your husband is just going to be the one there in person, I don't think they would necessarily, see that as a downside. If anything, I think that's really unique and it is going to be a really cool differentiator for you in the area because now more than ever, a lot of dads are working from home or a lot of dads
Mhm.
are caregivers. So maybe it could be, a strength that you lean into. But as I was saying, I do think that there's plenty of opportunities for you to be kind of owners together as a family on social media, on the website. It doesn't just have to be relying on him to be the quote unquote face. But I do think it's really unique and I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, that was definitely something that was kind of in the back of my mind. I just wasn't sure how it was going to be received. But I think I just needed that reassurance because either way, that's not going to change because I'm the one that has to work and he's the one that has the flexibility of not working. But going off of the social media reference that you made, I am the one that's handling the most of the social media, so I'm the one that people are communicating with, especially in like our focus groups. So My intention is to slowly start bringing him in to the mix, and then hopefully being able to address, like, how do we make dads more comfortable or male caregivers more comfortable in coming into this space? Like, what do we have to do to attract them?
Yeah, and
So,
I think a lot of that comes to your branding. I mean, first of all, your husband just being there and being very active in the business is unique in itself. So I think, just having that is going to really work in your advantage in that regard. But for me, where because my husband, that's one of his biggest pet peeves is when he wants to take our kids somewhere because we both work. So when he wants to take our kids somewhere and I show him this great indoor playground and he walks in and like everything is pink or purple and like the drinks are called like the tired mom, or something like that. They use very, gender exclusive language. Everything is
mm,
clearly branded towards moms. That's where he kind of doesn't feel welcome. So I think if you
okay,
focus on, the gender neutral branding, you don't, lean too far into the, mama mom culture. I think that's where my husband, at least specifically, gets pretty turned off, where he feels like even to just order a drink, he has to like, say something embarrassing. Like I forget, like when we went somewhere, I think the drink was specifically called like the Mombi. And he was like, I really wanted it, but like it just felt so degrading to order like a Mombi latte or whatever it was
that's
called.
fair.
So I think just being really aware of the words that you're choosing and even like when it comes to like the art that you hang, just being aware of how that might feel for both genders. I think I wouldn't worry about it too much, especially because I think it's more common than ever for men, whether it's a grandpa or whether it's, a father to take a child out and about. I think the stigma has completely decreased. And even some places are still using like mama or mom in the business name. So I think as long as you don't, do anything like that, I wouldn't worry about it. And a lot of spaces as well will do events or will do meetup times specifically for fathers. Because as I mentioned, especially since the pandemic, so many dads are working from home, they're splitting childcare duties. A lot of our work schedules are more unconventional right now. So, maybe they're healthcare workers or maybe they, just don't have a conventional 9 to 5 schedule. So they want something to do with their kids during the day. I think even just having events for male caregivers or fathers specifically on the calendar, even if they don't want to or can't attend those sessions, just having them on the calendar and on your website is just going to give them a more welcoming feel and not like they're going to, be looked at like an alien when they walk in the door
Yeah.
because like honestly, after a while, it got so bad to the point where my husband was like, I'm just not going to take them anywhere unless we can go
Oh,
together, just because he felt so out of place. But
sure.
again, I that was years ago, and I think businesses in general have come a long way since then. So I think as long as you're not doing anything crazy
Sure.
or having very gendered language or art or anything like that, I think you'll be fine.
It's funny that you mentioned that because my husband's very creative. And he's very he can definitely like tap into his like childlike play. He's so good with my son that he's definitely the fun parent. And when we were talking about aesthetic and design, he shut me down so fast. He said, "No, ma'am, we're not doing these neutrals with pops of like blush pink." And he's like, "No, we are not doing that. Kids deserve color and everyone should feel comfortable in our space." So he was the one that really put his foot down, and now we're going with a very like nice shades of the rainbow, but a more diverse color palette than I would have chosen. And I'm really thankful for that now that we're on this end, that we have a logo and looking at everything and seeing how, okay, I can see how this feels more inclusive. So I really do appreciate having his input on that, because my husband would also be in the same boat as your husband as far as like, hey, I don't feel welcomed here. We'll just go together and only together.
Absolutely. And that was actually I every year I do a trends video for the upcoming
Yes.
year for the indoor play industry. And those were two things that I talked about in this year's video is, the end of sad beige play
Yeah.
spaces and how I wanted to see more color in play spaces. And I think that one has really come to fruition. I've seen a lot
Hmm.
more color being used. So I'm so glad that you are hopping on that trend. And I also in that video talked about more gender neutral spaces and not catering just specifically to parents and how important that was. So I think you guys are, again, right. You have the right idea in both of those regards.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because we had that conversation, and literally the next day, I drive an hour to work. The next day, I listened to your trends podcast, and I was like, oh, now I have to tell my husband that he was so right. But
Okay,
that's
you
what it
don't have
took.
to show him. You can take all the credit. I don't mind.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, no, I'm definitely glad that we did go that way, because he, I know that he has great input, but I was just so set in my ways. And then definitely after I heard it from you, and he definitely got on me after that, and he's like, you just had to hear it from somebody else. It's okay, I'm used to this.
Yeah, and I think because you're already utilizing social media for feedback, that's another great point of feedback. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily want to ask in a mom's group, but if you have any greater community pages, ask dads, what would you like to see? What would make you feel welcome? What would make you visit one space over another space? Because I think you could get a lot of great feedback. I'm always tempted to like go the stereotypical route and say like put a tap of beer or something like that, or put a pool table or something like that.
Sure.
But this is a great opportunity to ask them what they might want. And because I know my husband is like a very specific, he has a very specific set of wants and needs. He has a specific style. So I know that I could benefit from hearing other perspectives as well.
Sure.
So just as much you're asking the moms in your community, especially if you want to make dads and other male caregivers feel welcome, this is a great opportunity to continue doing what you're already doing and just ask them because, they might have feedback that you would have never even thought of. Like for example, we go to this one indoor playground that has just a couple little like old school Pac-Man setups like on the wall. So they don't take up a lot of space. They're like literally mounted on the wall. But oh my gosh, my husband will recommend that play space to all of his friends who have kids
Mm.
until the day he dies or it closes, whichever comes first. But just those little things like the 80s, 90s nostalgia and having that in there, just while the kids play or while they're taking a little snack break, just having that there, he absolutely thought it was the coolest thing ever. And he thought it was so unique. Whereas I have been to this space like 5 times, didn't even notice it. So again, I think this is a great opportunity to ask because they could surprise you with some really amazing ideas that we could have never thought of.
Absolutely, because you're right. I would have never thought of that. So I appreciate it.
Me either. So I think this is a great time when, if we're not a part of a specific community, ask.
Sure.
That's exactly what I had to do. Now I actually have a son with autism, but at the time, I didn't know anything about autism or what it was like to be autistic. So when I was creating our sensory friendly space and putting together that list of equipment that I referred to earlier, I had to do a lot of research. I had to hire a consultant. I had to ask the community. And again, what I pictured at the beginning was nothing like we ended up with at the end. And that was because I took the time to, do the work and ask and have conversations with people that knew better than I did.
Good to know. Thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. I think you had one more question.
Yes. So my last question is, so from listening to your podcast and also being in Playmaker Society, I have understood, or I understand how important it is to have a great website.
Yes.
With that being said, I think I have found somebody that I want to work with. They're local, which is something else that we're trying to focus on is we really want to pull from our local community where we can. Um, and this web designer actually works out of our area and with a lot of companies in our area. So the initial pricing for them, because they're also a marketing firm,
Okay.
is $2,800. Because we were referred from another one of their clients in the area, they are actually giving us $1,000 discount,
Wow.
which is great.
That's
And I've
amazing.
looked at their work, and their work is great. So now we're looking at 1,800,
Okay.
which sounds more than reasonable for a website and all of the
Yes.
things that we discussed that includes. I mean, it sounds like a great deal.
Yes.
So my concern comes after that, where it's $299 a month. To get all of the extras that come with it. I was wondering what your thoughts were because I have listened to your other podcasts that discuss like SEO.
Mhm.
Um, and different things like that. I am not web savvy at all. However, my husband is.
Mhm.
So he's already been looking into this stuff, and I do think it's something, and he also thinks it's something that he can do. However, we have never done it, so I don't know if it's as simple as saying, "Hey, I'm going to look into it and try and teach myself how to do it," or if it's something that a small mom and pop startup business should invest $299 a month moving forward.
Yes, and I do have you did send me a list of what would be included in that $299 a month, and we can dive into it because I have some specific recommendations. But just to sum everything up, long story short, do I think that's a reasonable price? Absolutely. Do I think you need to invest in it? No. And we can kind of go through why, and I completely understand why they charge that because we do web design for businesses, and that's very on par with what we charge for something similar. However, we almost never recommend it for indoor playground businesses specifically. And one of the reasons for that is, you know, and I can go through some of what's included, but a lot of what's included, first of all, is a one-time setup. So I'm looking at things like the website pages, foundational SEO. And just to give you a little context, and I did have to ask my husband because he does all of the web design for our clients. Foundational SEO is basically just your basic website content, your website title, your page titles so that they actually show up in search engines, your page descriptions, things like that, making sure all of the headers are appropriate on your website and have your keywords and things like that. That's a one time effort where the only way that I would say paying that $299 a month might actually be worth it and give you a return on that investment is if they do SEO upkeep, because that's something that usually falls by the wayside, especially when people are brand new in their business. So by regular SEO upkeep, I mean posting blog content that is packed with your relevant keywords for your area, or continually adding new pages or providing a lot more support than it looks like is included. Because on this list, I don't see anywhere, 2 to 3 blog articles a month or something like that, because that's
Mm,
really needed to kind of maintain that search engine optimization after your website is launched. Do I think you could absolutely do that yourself or hire a virtual assistant or somebody that's a lot less expensive to do it? Absolutely. But that's one of the main reasons why I would say that I personally, if I were you, would not invest in this because it looks like the $299 a month is just for updates and support. And honestly, again, being in this industry, I think for our industry specifically, it's actually going to create more harm than good in your business. Because with an indoor playground slash play cafe, you're going to need to make constant updates to your website. You're going to be needing to add new events, take away events, add language to your websites, constantly update your frequently asked question page. You're going to maybe want to change your hours, especially in your first year in business. I think it would be a much better use of your time, money, and energy to figure out how to operate your website yourself and make those changes yourself. Because in this industry, speed and agility of decisions and implementing those decisions is everything. So, one thing that jumped out at me from this list of what's included in the $299 a month is it says it includes e-support and updates, but one thing it doesn't say is how quick those updates can be
mm,
turned around and how frequent they're willing to do these updates. So, for example, it might be 2 to 3 days, which for them might be completely reasonable to implement a change, but for you, it might cause a huge bottleneck in your business.
mhm,
Whereas I would much rather see you or your husband or a team member be able to just hop in, change your hours real quick, or add an event, or change your birthday party package. I think there is so much power in you being able to make those updates yourself. And again, I think paying that $299 a month for what is on this list, which when it really comes down to it is e-support. So if anything happens to your website, which is honestly very rare, it's very uncommon to see websites actually go down. And in that case, you can hop on Fiverr or something like that and have someone troubleshoot with you if you really need it. But you have the benefit of having a tech savvy husband, so you could probably figure it out. And honestly, what website builder are you using?
Do you mean like where we got our domain or
No, not where you got your domain. Where is your website going to be hosted actually? Like Squarespace, WordPress?
we don't know yet. We're still working on that.
So I would recommend probably anything other than WordPress if you want to make those updates yourself. Just because you mentioned that you are not as tech savvy as a person, I also put myself in that category. So my husband is a WordPress web designer. He can do amazing things with them and make them look very custom, and they have all the bells and whistles. But often owners really struggle with updating all of their plugins and widgets, making very basic updates. So I generally recommend like Squarespace, Wix, things like that, because again, they're meant for small business owners to be able to access, utilize, change, update themselves regularly. So I think a lot of, my recommendations kind of come down to what platform you end up choosing. So what's great about Wix, Squarespace, all of those types of platforms is that any troubleshooting issues or anything you want to change or update, there's going to be a tutorial on YouTube. I completely taught myself how to customize, update, change our Squarespace website. And I had absolutely zero tech knowledge before I entered this. And I was able to maintain everything completely independently, especially when my husband was working full time, way back when. And that was so incredibly helpful. But again, to sum it up, I would say I think that's a reasonable price for what they're including, and I get why they're charging it. I just don't think that you need it. Now, if you were like a lawn cutting business or something like that, and you never needed to make changes, your website was very static, you just needed someone to be there in the event something happened, or, in the event that there was an infrequent change that needed to be made or something like that. And they just wanted to be completely hands off because they're, out cutting lawns or something like that. Then I would say, okay, maybe. However, because our industry requires such agility and so many changes and so many pivots and so many little details, your website, like I talk about all the time, it's going to be a huge determinant of your success. So I would, again, much rather see you train yourselves or train your team members on how to make those updates. And that would make that $2.99 a month completely irrelevant. And again, I think it would actually detract from your success because it creates a huge bottleneck. Because again, think of how much effort you have to go through to reach out to them, describe the problem that you're having, or describe the change that you want. Then they have to forward it to someone, then they have to implement the change, and they have to communicate, and they have a, project lead time. And, like I said, it doesn't include how many updates per month. I know most web design companies have a maximum of like 5 to 6 in that price range of updates per month. And I was on my website like almost every day making little changes, or, especially in that first year. So again, do I think it's fair? Yes. I'm not trying to, badmouth this company whatsoever. I just don't think you need it.
Okay, so then with that being said, he did mention that at any point that we feel comfortable, so he was saying if you do go with the 2.99 a month, at any point that you feel comfortable that you can handle everything on your end, he's like, we'll just stop those charges. Do you think it's worth it from what they offer to pay for it for a month or two? Or do you think all of that is something that what's in this list isn't necessarily something that we even need?
I mean, like I said, the only thing that I see on this list, and I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but I can maybe, put it in the description if anyone wants to look at it. I went through the entire list. The only thing that is not a one-time effort is there's back-end maintenance, which again is very rare that you need to do back-end maintenance unless you have a WordPress website. WordPress websites tend to need more updates, and they have to be done by somebody who deeply understands WordPress. But there's e-support, so if there's any issues, and then it just says updates. So I don't see anything on this list other than the updates and monitoring, and that backend support. So if you have the money, first of all, if you have the money and you feel like you just want to have somebody that knows you, that knows your business, that is going to be able to kind of hold your hand through that transition process, I think that's a great idea to pay for it for a couple times. And I'm glad that they're not requiring like a 12-year contract or something like that, because that's where I kind of get nervous for people, because I do think you're going to realize after a month or two, like, hey, I feel really confident I can do this myself. It's actually creating a bottleneck. So I don't think there's a downside as long as you have the budget to do it for a couple months, again, as you transition. And I know we do, but a lot of web design firms, they'll give you some training or maybe a resource library or something like that to kind of help you take what they've built and run with it after they're done. And, of course, you want to keep a great relationship. So if a year down the line, you just decide, you know what, I I've, nailed down my hours. I don't really need as many updates as I did in the first year. I just want to hire them again to, maintain the site. I just don't want to do it. And, you haven't had success delegating that to your team. You can always pick it back up if they're willing to do that. But
Okay.
I don't see any downside in hiring them for a couple months. One other question, because it kind of factors into my decision. I should have asked it first. What point of sale system are you planning on using?
So we're still figuring out what we're going to use.
Okay.
We have looked at a few, but we're still deciding what is going to best suit us.
Yeah, because that also impacts your decision, I think, quite a bit. Because on here I see like Zapier integration for web automation that can get a little bit tricky. Even I, though, as a non-tech person, I utilize Zapier a lot. It's basically just a connection between something like your email service provider or your point of sale system with your website. It took me a while to get used to. So again, maybe having a couple months of support is going to be good there. But why I asked that question is that some integrations are clunkier than others and require more
Right.
maintenance. They break more often. So whichever one you feel more strongly about. So it doesn't sound like you feel too strongly about which website platform you have. Maybe your husband does. But if you feel really strongly about a point of sale system, or if there's a clear front runner when it comes to either of those, let's say you decide on a point of sale system that you really, really love. You do a demo, you fall in love with it. Ask them who they integrate with best, because that might give you an idea of what website builder, what website platform you might want to use. So maybe they say we integrate really well with Wix, but our connection with Squarespace is iffy. That can impact your decision. So again,
Mm,
whichever one you feel more strongly about. I know some people like were 100% set on Wix or 100% set on Squarespace. So then I said, okay, do research on what point of sale systems integrate best with Squarespace, because not all of them do. So figure out again which one you feel most strongly about, and then just do some research. And your web designer will probably have some recommendations for you in that regard as well, because the clunkier connections could definitely create issues where you need that extra support.
okay. No, that's good to know. That's something I hadn't even thought of. And then with that being said, I just have one follow-up question. How important do you think it is to, or like, how would you compare your Facebook presence upkeep to your website upkeep to your Instagram upkeep, given that, say, those are the two social medias that I choose to really focus on, right? Because I think it'll be impossible for me to be on everything, at least at the beginning. Um, what do you think about that?
So they're really at different points in your quote unquote customer journey, or some people like to use the word sales funnel. So I think a website is the absolute foundational piece, because you can have, 100,000 Instagram followers, but if your website is not user friendly, or you can't use it on a mobile device, or it doesn't accept payments well, or you don't have online booking, those 100,000 followers are not going to convert into any sales or customers. So I like to kind of start at the place where the sale or the conversion actually takes place, which in this case is your website. And even if your online booking isn't set up quite yet, your email collection will be. So how you generate leads for your business, how you communicate your business, what your messaging looks like, that's what's going to actually create sales and customers. So I would focus on your website first. If you have
Okay.
a limited amount of time, yes, social media is absolutely important. But again, if you have nowhere to send them, that's actually going to make them excited about your business and becoming actual clients and booking parties and things like that. It's not going to mean anything, and your effort
Okay.
is going to be fruitless. So I think focusing on the website is incredibly important. And something else to consider is that SEO or search engine optimization piece, because when people are typing in like first birthday party venue plus your town or whatever the case may be, those are hot leads. Those are people that are going to be much more likely to make a purchasing or booking decision then and there based on their search results than somebody just randomly scrolling on social media, right? Just kind of
Sure.
zoning out while they're nursing or something like that. Those, social media followers are great and they absolutely contribute to a business's success. But those hot leads are the lowest hanging fruit. And those are what I would work on converting first, again,
Okay.
with your website, with your point of sale system. And then you can focus on the social media component after. But what I would hate to see you do is generate all of this excitement on social and then not get email addresses or contact information for them because your website isn't set up, or have them go to a website that completely turns them off because it's not aligned with what your business is actually going to be in the end. So does that make sense? I know that was
Yeah.
kind of a long-winded answer, but
No, no, that's perfect.
yeah, website first and then social media,
Social media.
because once you start driving traffic to your business, especially when you're in the pre-opening phases, your website is your business, right? Until you can actually welcome people into your facility, all they have to judge you on is your website. So I would make sure that is a complete reflection of what you want to put out there in the world. And what I would hate to do is have you drive all this traffic to something that isn't a representation of something you feel proud of or what your business, like I said, is ultimately going to be.
Okay, thank you. That was super helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was so great talking to you. I really, really appreciate it. Do you have social media handles set up yet where we can follow you, or a business name?
Um, so I just started our Instagram and it's Little Harts Play Cafe, and Hearts is spelled Harts. And that is just because we are on Hart Street,
I
and
love that.
the owner or the founder of our town is their last name is Hart. So we kind of just went with that. So yeah, Little Harts Play Cafe.
That is very cool. And when you have your website, I will update the show notes and the video description
Thank
to
you.
reflect that as well.
Thank you. This has been great. I really appreciate the opportunity. Everything that I have read and watched that I have gotten through you has been super helpful. It's really given me a good direction and given me confidence, along with everyone else in the Facebook group, being helpful and being able to search the Facebook page for different things is so worth it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was so nice. But thank you very much. This was such a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing all of your success in the future.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right, that wraps up my conversation with Jessica from Little Hearts Play Cafe. I'm going to link all of Jessica's social media handles and her website as they become available in the video description. But again, if you like this style of video, let me know in the comments. And if there is ever a question that you have or a topic that you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comments as well. I love creating videos that you want to watch and that actually move your business forward. All right, have a great day, Playmakers. Bye for now.